Greetings, fellow mountain bike enthusiasts, and welcome back. Welcome to the first ever of hopefully many Nerds on Dirt Nerding Out, where we take a nerd's look at bikes and gear. Our first episode, hopefully of many, is brought to us by the shop I work at, Portland Bike Gallery. Details down in the description below. And what we're going to be looking at today is the Trek Fuel EX 9.7. This is the 2020 Trek Fuel EX 9.7. The Fuel EX models have been a staple in Trek's bike line for their trail bike models for years. I personally had the last gen of this bike, 2018 Fuel EX, and it was a pretty capable bike. I did make some changes to move it a bit more toward the all-mountain spectrum, but it was still a bike that I could ride all day, and I even did an enduro on it. The old Fuel tend to lean a bit more toward the XC side, where this new Fuel leans a bit more toward the all-mountain side. It's not to say that it can't do a all-day ride or even an XC race, but it's definitely an even more capable bike. And the old Fuel, there was a few changes that I really wish they had made, and oddly enough, they made a lot of those changes and more on the new Fuel. Since Trek gave the top Fuel kind of a bump into the more trail rim or the down country realm, it made sense for them to kind of move the Fuel EX a little bit more toward the all-mountain side. What they've done for this year is starting out with the head angle. Head angle got a little bit slacker, down to 66 in the low position, which pretty much is where 90% of the people run it, which is great. I think it's a sweet spot for trail bikes, not too fast, not too short. They also, something that's very great, is they steepen the seat angle by 1 degree to a 75-degree seat angle. I know 1 degree doesn't seem to sound like a lot, but it really is. You can actually feel it when you're climbing. It makes a pretty big difference. Another change is they moved away from the full floater suspension system, which basically had the linkage that would continue up and connect to the shock here, but they moved it to a static point, just like on the Remedy and the Slash, which almost always had this static point. It made the bike a lot more stiffer, which bigger guys like me appreciate, and it also helped reduce a little bit of weight on the bike as well. And now that Trek's moved this bike a bit more toward the all-mountain category, they spice things up a little bit by increasing the front travel of the front fork. The original Fuel EX was a 130 front, 130 rear, but this Fuel gets a 140 millimeter fork, which actually lends to moving it up to a 150 fork, which is what I actually put on my last gen. The 9.8 and the 9.9 actually come with Fox 36 forks, lending it even more toward the all-mountain feel. The seat angle and the head angle and a longer fork were really the things that I was really wishing on the old gen Trek would have done to the Fuel EX, make it a little bit more burly. One thing I didn't expect them to do, let's take a look at this. I've got this handy dandy little box for storage inside the frame. It also comes with a very nifty little bag that actually you can throw your tube and your tools inside. There's lots of different names for this box, and Trek knows that, they weren't the first to do it, but it just makes sense. One thing I did find out though is when I test rode this bike, it was an extremely wet day, and it did take a fair amount of washing to get it to the point where you see it here. This box does leak a little bit. The other company that does a box like this, theirs also leaks. So this is something to think about if you're planning to put a baguette or maybe a 7 1/4 inch sausage inside there, is make sure it's a dry day or your snacks are gonna get ruined. Now that we've talked about the changes from the last generation to the new generation of the Fuel EX, let's go ahead and talk about the 9.7 specifically. The 9.7 is your lowest end model that comes with a full carbon frame. On the last gen model, you got a carbon main triangle, and you got carbon seat stays, but this section was an aluminum stay. This year, you get a full carbon stay. One thing that's really neat is they've changed this linkage. You can actually see where the cables are now routed to the rear end. It's very clean compared to the other ones where it exited here and crossed up and over the top. So this is a really cool modification. Now the 9.7 is kind of an interesting bike because it's basically for somebody who really wants to get into the carbon but maybe can't afford to do a 9.8 or a 9.9. And it's somebody who wants a very good frame, a solid set of suspension, and parts that will definitely get you out on the trail and get you back home again, but it's something that could be upgraded as time goes on. What we've got up front here are the Fox 34 rhythm forks. It looks like a very simple fork. All you have is your simple compression here, and you've got your rebound underneath here. But I gotta say, I was really impressed when I rode this fork. It feels like a much higher end fork than what it is. The grip damper in here is really fantastic. And I do personally like the fact that you can adjust this. You can go full squish mode here. You can go like a trail mode, and then this nearly, not completely, will lock it out. So I really like that. If you don't like to fiddle with dials, this is a fantastic fork. Air it up, set your sag, set your rebound at the bottom, you're ready to go. Rear suspension wise, we've got the Fox Float Evolve with the reactive valving to it. The reactive is a pretty neat system that was developed in cooperation with Penske Racing. The valve itself actually gives you really good small bump sensitivity, but it also tends to stiffen up when you pedal. So you're not losing any of your pedal stroke to bob of the suspension, but you're still getting a really good ride. So it's a great shock. 3-position, you've got locked out, which is not, again, not completely locked out, but this would be something for like pavement or fire road climb. Trail mode in the center there, that's pretty much where I'd say 90% of the riding up here in the PNW is. And then you've got full-on squish party mode. So it's a really great system. You've got your rebound adjuster there. Again, very simple. Air it up, set your rebound, and if you don't like to mess with dials, you don't have to. Now let's go ahead and talk about the drivetrain on this bike. This bike, you have a mix of an NX shifter, an NX chain, an NX cassette, which actually runs on a Shimano style Hyperglide freewheel, and a GX rear derailleur. Now this is one of the things that kind of bothers me about how product managers spec bikes, but it's because of consumer perception. If you look at most bikes, you're gonna see one level of componentry, and then for some reason, they're gonna have, usually the rear derailleur is a step up. And what the product managers know is that when you're in there and you're shopping for a new bike and you see, oh wow, this has NX, but that rear derailleur is a GX, that's pretty cool. The thing is, the rear derailleur has basically two jobs: to move the chain up and down on the cassette and occasionally be sacrificed to the rock gods and random stick. Really, an upgraded rear derailleur does not give the rider any more feedback. You could have the lowest end derailleur or the highest end derailleur. You're not gonna really tell a difference. What I feel that they should do is this should be upgraded to a GX. Now this NX shifted fantastic. This thing did not miss a beat, even when I was shifting under load on purpose to see what it would do. My only complaint about this guy is it feels like you're pushing against one of those red rubber erasers. It doesn't have a nice, crisp, clean feel when it changes gears. It'll change gears like a champ. It just doesn't give a very positive feeling when you're doing it. This would be an upgrade that I would say, not the first upgrade, we'll get to that next, but this would be my second upgrade on this bike. Talking about upgrades, the first upgrade that I would do on this bike would be to replace these brakes. These are the Shimano MT401 brakes. And if you look at this lever, this thing is the size of a moto lever. Ergonomically, it's kind of terrible. The brakes themselves are actually a 4-piston caliper. So it's actually a really decent brake. The only catch is this lever. They feel terrible. You have to move them in really, really far to get your finger in that proper position where you get a good center brake. And even though the brakes work really well, the lever itself kind of lends itself to hand fatigue over longer riding. Something I noticed. But this is a fairly minor upgrade. There's a couple ways that you could do this. If you're going to keep minimum cost, you could just replace these levers with the BR501 model, which is a step up, which actually, if you do a little research, you'll find that the BR501, they're calling the hidden XTs. They work fantastic. They have great modulation and great power. They're just not as fancy and they're a little bit heavier. So that's something you could do if you're trying to keep your prices down. You could basically go on to, I don't know, say bikegallery.com and into the shop section and send us a message and we'd be happy to order them for you. Shameless plug, I know. If you don't want to just replace the brakes, you could move up to an SLX set, you could move up to XT. I mean, it really just depends on your wallet, but this would be the thing that I would replace first. The rest of the bike, pretty darn capable, and you could basically go through and upgrade things as they wear out, or if you want to try and save weight. The wheels and tires on this bike are actually really good. The tires themselves are the Bontrager XR4 Team Issues, and it's a big 2.6 meaty tire. And with Bontragers, when they say 2.6, they mean 2.6. Some of the other companies out there don't quite measure up to what's on the sidewall of their tires. These XR4s are fantastic in the dry. If you're riding in PNW winter, I definitely recommend getting a pair of XR5s, which are a little bit more burly of a tread pattern, but they work much better in the mud, much better in the wet. Or maybe a set of Maxxis, say DHR, or maybe the Asagais. Those are also fantastic wet tires. These line comp rims from Bontrager, while not the lightest rim on the planet, they are very durable and they will last you for years. Another great thing, the Bontrager hubs are a sealed bearing hub. You don't have to worry about a cheesy low-end ball bearing hub. You can press new bearings into this thing. They'll go forever. It's not fancy, but it'll get the job done. The dropper post on this bike is, of course, the Bontrager line dropper post. In the past, some of these units have had some issues. There was some cartridge problems where when it got cold or too mucky, these things would not perform very well, but they fixed that back in 2019 and the new ones are fantastic. I have ridden mine through every kind of condition you can imagine, from the driest dirt to the muckiest muck, to the point you can't even see the bike underneath the mud, and it's worked like a champ. It's a seal cartridge system, it's easy to overhaul, it's just bulletproof. The only complaint anyone seems to have, and actually I got used to it, is the return speed isn't the fastest. But it's not terrible either. Like I said, it takes a little getting used to. The lever is actually a pretty nice lever. It's solid and robust. It's got a good slick feeling. I've never had problems with my hand slipping off of it. It's a very solid system. I think this is a great bike, and I was really, really happy the new direction that Trek took with the Fuel EX. It's a very capable bike. There really isn't anything, except for maybe extreme bike park or the most gnarly trails out there, that you could throw at this bike and not do. It can do marathons, you can do enduros on it. It's a great little bike at a great price. Check it out. I'm not gonna go over the standard things like the ABP system or the Minnow Link. That's definitely something that you can look up at trek.com. And that, fellow mountain bike enthusiasts, is a 2020 Trek Fuel EX 9.7. Kind of an overview, kind of a little bit of insider, bike guy information. If you like this, leave a comment in below. We'll start doing more of these videos as long as we can get our hands on bikes and gear, which so far hasn't seemed to have been a problem. This has been actually a really fun bike to ride, and this has been kind of a challenging video to shoot, so hopefully it turns out good. Again, thanks for watching, like and subscribe.